The honourable member from Calgary-Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is a pleasure to stand and debate this important piece of legislation. And first off, I would like to say that I'm pleased to see the Premier and this government bring this forward and recognize the importance of this issue. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a devastating condition, and I've had the opportunity to meet with various stakeholders over the course of the summer break to discuss this bill, and some of them have opened up to me about the stresses, as the Honourable Member from Edmonton Riverview just did, that they have experienced while on the job. The reality is there are few professions that have such prolonged and consistent exposure to the types of events that our first responders see on a regular basis. These incidents would cause nightmares in the average citizen. But for our first responders, they're just part of the job, part of the everyday routine. However, some of these experiences may have a more traumatic and long-term effect. Now, due to the extreme nature of some of these stories that that were shared with me, I'll spare the details of this House, but I think it's important to remember that when an infant dies, or a toddler drowns, or when a mother is breathing her last breaths and asking a first responder to pass a message on to her children, it's those people who have to go home at night. They have to look their wives, their loved ones in the face. They have to go to bed. They have to get up the next day and go do the exact same thing over again. Now, this is the reason that we need to get this bill right. Although first responders possess strength that is commendable and their ability to make swift and decisive decisions under the stress of extreme situations is very incredible, we in society at large need them to be able to function at a high level in order for them to fulfill their roles of protecting us. Now, they understand their role and know full well what it is they've signed up for. Our role should be to return the favor. We need to support them and their families when post-traumatic stress disorder is diagnosed, and we need to ensure that the treatment that they receive is one that allows them to take their lives back. And we need to ensure we don't play politics with their mental well-being. Now, there are many positives in this bill. The presumptive nature should go without saying. And again, I'd like to congratulate the government for recognizing that. The inclusion of EMTs, peace and police officers is a very logical decision as well. There will be discussion in this House if other, careers should be added to that mix, and I am happy to start where we're at now. But I'm pleased to see that the bill also explicitly notes that the diagnosis will be contingent on the most recent edition of the Diagnostic and Statistical Model of Mental Disorders published by the American Psychiatric Association. With that, we can confidently move forward knowing that our first responders will always be diagnosed with the most current information possible. And that said, I would like to flag that the standards are set to change next year when the DSM-5 comes into play in May. And that may impact whether or not individuals who may not have qualified leading up to May of 2013 may then be able to under the new model. It may present a challenge for the WCB, and I would just like to flag that. I'm also particularly pleased to see this legislation covers first responders who are or have been a first responder, and I'm hopeful that the compensation will be offered to those who have struggled to receive coverage from WCB for this condition in the past. In my constituency, there is an individual who spent 26 years in the military and as a firefighter, and about 10 years ago, he started suffering the trauma of post-traumatic stress disorder. He could not get coverage from the WCB, so he spent years of his life and $30,000 of his own money to receive the treatment just to allow him to sleep at night. And I'm hopeful that this legislation may allow for some recourse for him to recover the cost of his treatment. Now, I do have some serious reservations about the phrase, unless the contrary is proven. There is a widely held belief that the WCB is inherently set up to dismiss or reject claims. And further, the Mental Health Commission of Canada Advisory Committee submission titled Stress at Work, Mental Injury and the Law in Canada, Final Revision, dated February 21st, 2009, page 16 notes, and I quote, "In some important ways, the uncertain legal situation surrounding mental injury at work mimics that which surrounded physical injury at work during the late 19th century. And ironically, it was the fact that employees were winning more of the claims against employers during that period that led to the introduction of workers' compensation legislation." It goes on to say, workers' compensation law is at an ethical and practical crossroads with regard to whether or to what extent it can and should hold the line against employee claims for stress-related disability. And I can table 5 copies of that, please. Well, Madam Speaker, it seems that this is an ethical problem that our WCB doesn't seem to have. As the Honourable Leader of the Opposition mentioned earlier, 20 of 42 claims presented to the WCB were rejected in just the last 2.5 years. And I believe it may be problematic for us to pass this legislation under the pretext that first responders are going to receive the treatment that they require, yet we are leaving it up to administrative laws to determine their accessibility. According to another paper filed by the Clinical Psychology Review, tabled here, that summarized 28 studies of PTSD in first responders, research suggests that approximately 10% of all first responders may meet the criteria for PTSD and could benefit from some form of treatment. In Alberta, that number would equal 2,700 of our men and women on the front lines. Now, according to WCB, 4 of a potential 2,700 have claimed PTSD coverage since 2010. That's quite a difference, and I suggest that we explore why. Why have only 4 when it should be closer to 2,700? Perhaps it's due to the negative stigma attached with mental disorders such as PTSD and amplified with first responders. In a PhD dissertation exploring PTSD in first responders, it is suggested that there is an unwritten code in these fraternities or families of first responders that you do not appear weak, you do not express emotion, and those who do appear weak face the fear of rejection from their coworkers, and those who take it a step further face being put on reduced duty or perhaps losing their job on the front lines altogether, which all too often is a part of the identity of who they are and what makes them the person that they are. This administrative stress, these feelings of abandonment by the people closest to them, and the depression linked to this can compound that trauma. And I believe that those first responders who are suffering from PTSD should have access to culturally competent clinicians who are familiar with the research and realities that first responders face, not only in the field when dealing with the crisis that instigates the disorder, but also the very real stressors that exist within the organizations that they work. 4 out of 2,700. The others are possibly self-medicating, drinking to fall asleep at night, taking drugs to stop the nightmares. We need to do a better job of educating the general public about mental health, and we need to do a better job educating our first responders about the realities of stress-related trauma. We need to do this because these are the people that we ask to protect us and save our loved ones in the time of crisis. And it is in all of our best interest to ensure that they're able to perform those duties when we need them to. I believe we need to embark on an educational campaign specific to first responders and help these people come to terms with their disorder, have the confidence to seek help without the fear of rejection from their peers, and ultimately to get their lives back. This legislation will be the first of its kind in Canada, and the precedent it will set is the reason and why it's so imperative for us to get this right. We need to set the bar high to ensure our first responders are provided with the best practices of post-traumatic stress disorder treatment, and they are not encumbered by the administrative laws of the WCB. And I look forward to working with my fellow members on all sides of the floor to strengthen this bill, and will certainly support it moving forward. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would like to move to adjourn debate at this time.